It was almost dark when we arrived at the location. Ashley parked our car in front of a remote centuries-old church. She paused for a second and looked at the bell tower. I moved closer to the window to observe what we'd be dealing with in our paranormal investigation. I immediately noticed what seemed like a columbarium in the basement. I can see the burial urns in the small wooden window from where I'm sitting. On the far side of the church is the burial site of the community. I thought to myself that that scene alone would be a magnet for paranormal activities. Ashley nudged me to wake me to my senses. I got too carried away because of the eerie surroundings outside the church. It was a Wednesday, so there were barely any people around because the church only opens on Sundays. I nodded to Ashley and told her to give me a minute. I took one last glance at the old church and took note of its drafty, dark, cavernous, and ambiguous nooks and crannies. I opened the door and stepped out of the car. Then, I took our bags and started walking to the church. Ashley closely followed me from behind. A family is walking away from the church in a tense and fast-paced manner. The woman was holding her 2 daughters in each hand and was almost dragging them. The man, whom I assumed was her husband, looked back to the front entrance of the church and waved to the priest standing there with a worried look on his face. When he saw us approaching the church, he nervously smiled, removed his cap with his right hand, placed it on his chest, and bowed to us. We bowed at him as well. When I looked back, I saw the man picking up one of his daughters and telling his wife to pick up the other. I saw them running to the first corner before disappearing behind the tall walls of the church. We are here at the request of the recently posted priest. When he talked to Ashley on the phone, he admitted that he had just recently finished his profession of vows. He also mentioned that he was responsible for maintaining the sacristy, which houses the sacred vessels, garments, wine, and bread used in the Holy Eucharist. Ashley told me after the conversation that the priest mentioned something about a ringing church bell, but she's not sure what he meant. Father Chris shook our hands when we reached the church's entrance. I was surprised to see that he was so young. If he's not wearing his brown robe, I would even mistake him for a seminarian. He was perspiring heavily when he told us that he was assigned to this historic church because no one else wanted to accept the post. He also added that the 2 previous caretakers of this church mysteriously died of heart attacks despite their being young and healthy with no history of major illness. He took an old antique key from his pocket and motioned us to follow him. We could see that he was tense and almost dropped his keys several times before finally succeeding in opening the church door. During Father Chris's phone call to Ashley, he mentioned that his purpose of calling us was to debunk the rumor that's going around, that a blind priest is attacking people who make a noise inside the church when the bell rings at night. He admitted that the story was also getting on his nerves, but he sincerely believed that there was a logical reason why the bell was ringing seemingly by itself during the night. Also, the deaths of the 2 previous priests could just be a coincidence. The priest pushed the heavy door to reveal its well-preserved interior. I felt that we were entering a time portal, bringing us to the 14th century when this church was initially built. Father Chris turned on the lights, gave us last-minute instructions, and bid us good luck, saying that he'd be back in the morning. We last saw him that night, hurriedly running outside of the church premises. We immediately went to work. As per Father Chris' instruction, our task is not to prove that haunting is legitimate but rather to debunk it. As far as we're concerned, it's very easy to prove that the haunting is not true. We just need to get footage that someone or something is triggering the bell on the bell tower to ring on its own. We just need to set up GoPro cameras all over the vicinity of the bell. If someone is pulling a prank, we'll catch him in the footage. Or if it's also possible that external factors are at work, for example, the wind, or a small tremor, is responsible for ringing the bell. Once we've proven that the ringing bell is a prank or a natural phenomenon, everything else can be easily dismissed as a coincidence. I went up to the bell tower to install GoPro cameras. I also installed wind sensors and a seismic recorder. Ashley, on the other hand, was left downstairs to set up our camera monitor. I was breathing heavily when I reached the top. From here, I could see half of the town. The bell itself is huge and is made of metal. Seeing this, I'm starting to doubt the wind hypothesis. Certainly, the wind could not move it. However, the wind can move the heavy rope and metal ball inside the bell. So, at least there's one possibility there. I was busy setting up the seismic meter when I heard footsteps going up the stairs. I thought it was just Ashley checking out my progress. But I dismissed that thought when I did not receive any response when I called her name. I called Ashley on her phone, and sure enough, she confirmed that it was not her. Unfortunately, the GoPro cameras are not operational yet at that time. So we were not able to capture the person on the stairs. After I set up everything, I went down the stairs while carefully eyeing the potential hiding spots. At this point, we are sure that someone is sneaking inside the church and ringing the bell at night. Ashley and I agreed that we would capture him on video soon enough. I glanced at the huge colored glass window on our back and saw a faintly lit silver moon hanging in the velvety sky. The moonlight filters through the burial site beside the church, through the ground, and the trees' yellowing leaves. The hazy shadows of the trees were swaying on the ground, creating the impression that many devils dancing covertly in the darkness, hatching some sinister scheme. I shuddered at the thought. We waited for a long time, but nothing happened until midnight. Either we were too busy setting up our equipment to notice that an intruder had arrived. I went around the church to ensure that everything was set up properly. A few minutes later, we heard footsteps going upstairs. I asked Ashley to check the camera's footage, but one by one, our video feed was turned off. I decided to go up there and check it personally. I passed through the shadowy doorway to the bell tower, which leads to the metal steps leading to the church bell. As I climbed, the lights began to flicker a lot after I switched them on. I could also hear my footsteps as the night was so quiet. Meanwhile, Ashley was left alone in the main chapel. She told me later that she heard knocking on the windows followed by indistinct whispers in her ear. She grabbed her phone off the table and called me. She told me what she was experiencing. I could sense her dread and anxiety. I was in the bell tower when I got her call. During that time, I felt that someone was watching me. So I looked around, but no one was there. The phone started to buzz and then started to make a crackling noise. I ran back downstairs after the phone was cut off. On the way down, I came close to having an accident. I felt hands pushing me down the stairs. I was fortunate to be able to restore my balance by holding tightly onto the stair railing after hitting it. Ashley was hysterical when I came back. She said she was hearing what sounded like Latin phrases over and over again. According to her, it's getting louder and louder in her head. I told her to calm down and repeat to me what she was hearing. I could see that she was confused, so I gave her water. After that, I pulled out my mobile phone and opened Google Translate. Ashley looked at me and nodded. She started repeating what she was hearing. Cruz sacra sit, mihi lux, non draco, sit, mihi dux, vade retro satana. Ashley gasped as she saw the translation appear on my phone screen. She looked at me and motioned that I read it. I read aloud, "Let the Holy Cross be my light, let me be the dragon leader, go back Satan." It doesn't make sense to me, so I googled the Latin phrase itself. My knee almost gave out when I saw the first result entry. A vade retro satana is a medieval Western Christian formula for exorcism, recorded in year 1415 manuscript found in the Benedictine Metten Abbey in Bavaria. Ashley and I looked at each other. We were both speechless. She told me that the whispers are now gone. But she's so tired, as if the experience sapped her strength. I suggested that she take a nap. I'll be at her side and check on the monitors. I'll wake her up if something happens. She agreed and laid down on one of the long wooden chairs and closed her eyes. Not long after Ashley fell asleep, I started hearing things around the church. For example, I heard creaking doors slowly opening, after which some would slam shut. I could also hear scratching on the ceiling. I just ignored it and focused on bringing the video feedback online. Besides, I don't want to leave Shine alone because she's helpless in her current condition. I managed to bring all the video feedback online. I checked my watch and realized that it was 15 minutes before 3 a.m. I always dread 3 a.m. because it's known as the witching hour. In our paranormal work, the peak of paranormal activity almost always happens during this hour. Ashley suddenly woke up because her phone was ringing. I looked at her and raised my shoulder. She got what I was saying and looked at her phone. She said that it was Father Chris's calling. After the call, Ashley narrated to me what they talked about. She said that Father Chris apologized that he didn't warn us sooner. After that, Father Chris told her the story about the haunting. The story goes that a priest once performed an exorcism on the church grounds. However, the spirit that possessed the little girl was so powerful that it eventually blinded the priest so that the priest could not read the Bible anymore. The priest went into depression and was eventually driven to his death by the demon. Not long after that, there were sightings of the blind priest ringing the bell at 3 a.m. Anyone inside the church during that time who made even the slightest noise was attacked by the priest and died in mysterious circumstances. Even if we don't believe it. Father Chris was adamant that we heed his warning. In his words, "Do not make any noise once the bell starts ringing." Ashley and I was dumbfounded. We didn't know how to react. Not long after that, we noticed the lights in our instruments flickering along with the church lights, which were completely turned off. Ashley moved closer to me and held my left hand. I could see that she was afraid. At precisely 3 a.m., we noticed a dark figure slowly manifesting in the hallway, leading to the bell tower. From where I was standing, I could see that it looked like an old priest in a brown gown. His eye socket was exposed. There was only darkness where his eyes should have been. Shine gasped, but I prevented her from making any noise by placing my right hand on her lips. After making sure that she understood that she needed to keep quiet, I released my hand. The blind priest slowly made his way to the stairs, until we could not see him anymore. I silently dragged Ashley away from our equipment because our equipment could make a sound. She followed me without any hesitation. We hunkered down in one of the hiding spots that I noted earlier, not long after the church bell started ringing. It rang for a full minute, then it stopped. We did not make any noise and waited tensely for the sunrise. As soon as the first rays of the sun entered the windows of the church, we hurriedly ran outside of the church into our car. We were so afraid that we left all our equipment.